Welcome back once again to the showcast, and it is time to welcome our second guest for this week. A little bit of an animated theme here. Our next guest is the showrunner and one of the producers of the hit Fox series Family Guy, and is now the creator of his very own animated series, Bordertown, that airs Sundays on Fox, 7 p.m., 6 p.m. Central, as part of the same Sunday night comedy block. Please welcome Mr. Mark Hentemann to the show. Mark, how you doing?
Good. How about yourself? Thanks
We're
for having me.
Yeah, no problem. We're doing really well. So,
Oh, good.
are you calling? Usually we like to find out where you're calling from. East Coast, West Coast. I'm assuming West Coast.
I am on the West Coast. Yes. Where are you guys?
Right outside of Philadelphia, actually.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay.
based inside of the Philadelphia area. So,
Okay.
uh,
Excellent.
but as I had mentioned, you've been the showrunner for Family Guy for. You've been working with Family Guy for quite a long time, and now Bordertown is your baby, and
Yes.
you're into the first season right now. For our listeners who haven't had a chance to check it out yet, tell us a little bit about the show.
It's about two families living on the border, the U.S. Mexican border, in a fictitious town called Mexifornia, and one of the families is the Buckwalds, and the father is Bud Buckwald, who's a border patrol agent. And he's kind of an Archie Bunker who feels like he's losing his place in the world and his town has changed around him. And next door to him lives Ernesto Gonzalez and his family. And Ernesto is an immigrant who's been in the country for 15, 20 years and, it works hard and is entrepreneurial and is already doing just a hair better than Bud, and it kind of drives Bud crazy.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's kind of the center of the show.
yeah. I mean, I've definitely checked out the show already, and it definitely makes me laugh. So I'm enjoying it for sure.
Oh, good. All right.
Uh, as I had mentioned too, you've worked on Family Guy for I think since season one, correct?
Yeah, I think I joined at the beginning of season two, which if I remember, it was like episode 8. I think season one did like a very brief or short order of episodes, and then it was after. If people remember this far back, they had premiered after the Super Bowl in 1999, and then they were off for like until May, and I think I got hired during that break, and they were just starting to ramp up for the next bunch of episodes.
Okay, yeah, 1999. Wow, I can't believe it was that long ago that they premiered.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing how long that is.
So, but I mean, obviously, working on Family Guy that long, working on an animated series, obviously, is something that isn't new to you. Were you nervous jumping into something of your own at all?
Um, Not too much. I was actually excited to try to do something. I had done a show, and it's actually the reason that I got hired on Family Guy is I had written a script, an animated script for Fox back in 1999, actually it was late 98, and MTV ended up airing a season of it. It was called Three South, and Seth read that script, and we were both at 20th, and he said, "Oh, you should help out on Family Guy and see what happens with your show." So that's how I got into Family Guy and stayed on Family Guy. And it's been great. It's a lot of fun. I know everyone very well over there, and it's great. But I was a little nervous, but mostly just excited to try something new, shift gears after so long on Family Guy.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I'm glad we're talking a little bit about Family Guy, at least for right now, just because, as Ben mentioned, you're a showrunner. And to be honest, I'm not exactly sure what a showrunner is, but it interests me because I hear a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, we're a showrunner for this show." So, could you go into exactly what a showrunner does? I guess, and maybe if it's different for an animated series than it is for live action.
Yeah, it's mostly across television. It's the same kind of position. It's usually a writer. Television tends to be more or less a writing-driven medium, and so writers who have been there long enough, they kind of rise up through the ranks, and you start taking on more responsibilities, and you become a producer, and then you become an executive producer, and then usually one or two of the executive producers are chosen to be responsible for everything that everything that is put on the air for the whole office. You kind of run the whole show, basically. That's why I guess it's called a showrunner. But yeah, I guess you're the equivalent of like a director on a movie set, but you're just responsible for delivering the shows to the network, dealing with the network and with the studios, but also internally, you're the creative. You're driving all the creative decision making, like the stories that you do, and ultimately you sign off on all the jokes, and you're in the room pitching jokes, but you're with the other writers and kind of guiding the script.
That's cool. So was there like a moment or a certain episode that maybe you wrote that kind of moved you up the ranks and got you into this showrunner position? It interests me to see how you kind of made your way through the ranks there.
Yeah, I always look back and think that the fact that I did that show on MTV, and that got picked up. So I started off on Family Guy. I was on those first 3 seasons of Family Guy, and then Family Guy got canceled. And during the 2 years that Family Guy was off, MTV ended up picking up that animated show that I had originally written for Fox, and so I ran that. I was fairly young for a showrunner and creator at the time, but I got great experience. I got to oversee the whole thing, and I oversaw the animation, and I got a much better understanding of not just the writing process, but directing the episodes and how to fix problems with animation. And as a result, when Family Guy came back, I had this experience under my belt, and I knew Seth would need help with a lot of that stuff. It's just a bear doing an animated show. So I just kind of, in addition to writing, I was helping out with all facets of production. And then I wrote a couple, I don't know if any specific episode I wrote. I wrote back to the pilot, which had gone over pretty well and was kind of an ambitious episode.
Right.
But I think mostly Seth had, I think I had sat in a room with him for a long time. So I think he was comfortable with my creative choices, but I think mostly he liked that I knew how to do all the different facets of the job.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Is Seth a big part of helping you out with Bordertown as well?
He's mostly kind of a non-writing executive producer. He helped. We talked about it when before I first went into Fox to pitch the show, and he came with me. But he's juggling a lot of different projects and shows, so he's often helpful calling the network and dealing with the network when there are bigger fights to fight. But as far as the day-to-day operations, he's kind of not involved as much in that.
Okay. I know one of the things that I love about animated shows are, their ability to pull in great casts for vocal talents. And Bordertown is really no exception to that. You're working with Hank Azaria, who he himself is no stranger to long-running animated series on Fox.
Right.
Right,
absolutely.
Working with The Simpsons, Judah Freelander, Missy Pyle, Alex Borstein from Family Guy as well.
Yep. All great. Nick Gonzalez, who plays Ernesto in Barracuda and JC. He's kind of newer to animation, but he's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, between Bordertown and, overall the years of Family Guy with all the people that you've had the chance to work with voice talent wise, is there anybody you haven't worked with yet that you would want to?
I haven't. I've sat in on records. And maybe I've recorded like a line or two of his, but John Benjamin is someone I really like that I've never really gotten to work with, but he always makes me laugh. I love his delivery. Yeah. Who else? I mean, Dan Castellaneta, I'm a huge fan of. I'm thrilled that I get to work with Hank. But yeah, that Simpsons cast is just amazing, and I grew up on them.
Yeah. Oh, because they've been around for, I don't even remember. I don't even know how many seasons they've been on at the
I
moment.
think they're somewhere around 27 or 28 by now. I think they started in 1990.
Yeah, that's
So yeah,
crazy. I mean, it
yeah,
started on Tracy Ullman, which is blows my mind still to this day.
yeah, which I think is 1989. I think that was on. So yeah, if we're in 2016, that's like 17 years ago.
Yeah,
Is
that's
that right?
still
Yeah, 20. No, 20. Not 17. 27.
27, yeah.
that's still crazy.
It's insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it
Wow.
seems like you had your interest in The Simpsons early, knowing when it started in 1989 and all that. I was wondering what your interest or how your interest started in animated comedy, because that kind of seems like your niche, and I certainly found some success there.
Yeah, yeah. I had always drawn growing up, and I was a caricature artist. Just I was not really well trained. I didn't have like technically I was never a good uh, draw artist, but I always kind of drew, and I had my own style, and I did caricatures in high school, and my first job I got kind of miraculously is I was a greeting card writer and illustrator for American Greetings in their alternative humor department, and yeah, I got to I amazingly they let me draw and illustrate my own cards, so I kind of learned. I had to learn a style because you're writing and drawing cards every day, and up until then, I remember noticing that like yeah, every drawing I have always done is different. So you had to figure out like what is your style going to be, so you don't have to reinvent it every time. But yeah, and I loved The Simpsons, and then some of my greeting cards got me into the television business. I got hired on David Letterman to write for The Late Show, and I was in live action at first, but then stumbled on Family Guy, onto Family Guy, a few years into the business, and I loved that. I loved and still love writing for animation because I just I'm such a fan of visual, absurd, surreal comedy, and you get to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the
You can do
obvious
whatever you want.
yeah, and I think the obvious follow-up here is, were you ever told which greeting card got you onto the Late Show? Because that's a pretty serious greeting card.
Yeah, I think they were none of the ones that got published because there was kind of a badge of honor at American Greetings that if nobody bought the funny cards. That's what we would always say. It's like the cards were bought. The median age of greeting card buyers was like 65-year-old grandmothers. And so when we were in the alternative humor department, if you ever did something that was really subversive or sarcastic or really just bizarre, it would often nobody would buy it. We had this rack in our department that was the sales rack, and it was all the test marketing, and the sales rating was on your cards. And if you got like a 0.0, that was cause for celebration because you had written something probably genuinely funny.
See, that's strange though, because I always go for the funny cards when I buy greeting cards for people. So I find
You're
that
not a
kind of weird.
65-year-old grandmother.
That's true. It's very, very true.
Yeah. Yeah, and I buy them too, and I always look. Most of them I'm like, oh my god, I can't ever send that to anybody that I know. But they do have them. I think there's more like niche when I was there. It's a hilarious industry. Like it was American Greetings and Hallmark. We were rivals, and we were the two big, companies. And there were all these niche, smaller companies that were starting to cater towards, much hipper cards and more subversive humor.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, I didn't write for those.
What was it American Greeting or Hallmark that had the old woman and her dog? I can never remember.
I think that's American Greetings.
That's what I think too, and I can't remember. Oh well.
Yeah, I could be confused. I knew we had Ziggy and Garfield, and there was like a big binder of rules for how to work for them. But fortunately, it was funny. That was the conventional humor department. Like there were in this giant office, there was the conventional humor department where you serviced all those characters. But I was lucky enough to land in the alternative humor where you kind of did whatever you wanted.
Yeah, exactly. I know over the last couple years, we've seen Seth jump off and do some work in film now, with Ted 2, and A Million Ways to Die in the West. Do you think that would be something you would ever like to explore one day in the future yourself?
Sure. If anyone ever entrusted me with directing a movie, I would definitely take them up on it. It sounds like it would be a ton of work. I got to kind of see it a little bit from the side as Seth was going through it. It seems like it's exhausting and a lot of work, but it also seems like, what the hell, if someone's going to let you do that, it seems like it'd be really fun at the same time.
Yeah, because you never know. You could find the same amount of success in that as well. So you wouldn't know until you tried it.
And it's a visual medium. I love the visual aspects of making television and film.
Yeah.
Is there like an idea that you might have where obviously movies are more kind of a long form than a television show, just as far as sitting and watching it's not longer than a half hour. So is there something that you might have an idea for that you weren't quite able to make just because it's tough to get it into a 30-minute animated comedy, so to speak?
Yeah, I've written a couple features, and they're sitting on a shelf somewhere. But one of the ones that I wrote and kind of sent around was a very absurd version of like a CSI. And I think they did a show. I saw that they had done a show of it, but it was just a very absurd sort of Naked Gun approach to CSI. It seemed like a easy no-brainer as far as a comedy, but like a David Caruso type lead.
Yeah, it's almost that Angie Tribeca thing they did on TBS. I don't know if you saw that at all.
Yeah, they did that recently.
Like that.
And then when I finished it, there was something whenever you're writing things, you always like have this hyper awareness of whatever shows up that's going to be your same idea. But there was something, I think it was on maybe Adult Swim or Cartoon Network, that was, a little bit of a version of a high-tech police investigative unit. But that was a little bit of trying to do that. But those things are all in the execution, it's all in how it's done.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of how it's done, I've never heard of this 3 South that you were talking about that you wrote for MTV, but the ratings are really good. And it was only out for a couple years. So was there something that happened there? Like you only wrote it for that certain amount because you were with Family Guy, or I'm just interested because the ratings were really good. So it wouldn't really make sense for it to get taken off the air or anything like that.
I think part of that might be the fact that ratings were back in 2001, ratings just were higher across the board.
Okay,
but I remember, I did 3 South, and there was, I'm going to blank on the name of the show. And I don't know if you know the producing team, Lord and Miller, and their directors. They did the 21 Jump Streets, and they did the Lego movie, and they did Last Man on Earth. They had a show called, I'm going to get it wrong, but it's like Zombie High School or something. And we both had animated shows in this block on MTV. But then a new regime took over MTV and decided they were abandoning animation for reality shows. And so we kind of found out halfway through. That's the thing about animation, is you have to write it so far in advance. You have to, with most animation, you're writing it a year in advance, that the entire regime of network executives could change by the time you finish and are ready to air.
Yeah,
that's rough at the animation stuff, like the actual drawing and all that stuff.
Right. Unless you're South Park, and blow it all out in
Yeah.
2 weeks.
So basically, what you're saying is this new regime came in and ruined MTV since
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
since they don't play music videos anymore. That was pretty much the last time I even watched MTV was for some of the animated shows that were on there. So
Right. They had done Beavis and Butthead and Daria. Those were
Daria, yeah.
great. And yeah, and I think they did those up until probably close to 99, 2000. And I think we were kind of following them, but by the time we were on the air and it was like 2002, I just remember getting this call that there was new executives and reality programming was, I guess, a lot less expensive, and they were just targeting, a younger audience with reality shows.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we're running out of time with you, but one thing I've always been curious about when it comes to animated shows, and especially with yourself being a showrunner and such, do you spend a lot of time in the studio with the voice actors, giving them notes and such as they're recording?
Yeah, you're always there directing all the voice actors, and some of them are kind of on autopilot. It's kind of fun being at Family Guy now because so many of the core cast, like Alex Borstein and Seth and Patrick Warburton and Seth Green and Mila, they've all been doing it so long that they just go in and they don't really need any direction. They can kind of do it themselves.
Yeah.
But on a first season show, there's a much more of you're in there and you're doing a lot of back and forth with the actors, and it takes more time, but sometimes it's exciting. You're still kind of finding the characters, and sometimes these actors, they just come at it from a direction that is surprising and can be really funny. And that's when you can kind of tell the difference between really great voice actors and those that aren't quite as good.
Yeah. Are there usually when they're in the studio and such like that in the beginning stages like this, early on in the show, is the animation already drawn at this point, or are the voices done first and the animation done to the voice?
In television, the voice track, the vocal track is usually the first thing that gets laid down. An editor, you kind of direct the actors, they come in, they just read off the script, and you kind of have to have in your head, I learned this when I was starting doing this at Family Guys, you kind of have to have in your head how it's going to look, to see what the scenes are going to play like.
Yeah.
And that kind of informs how you direct them, what kind of read you want them to give. But then the editor puts it all into what they call a radio play and you time it out. And then it goes to the director and the storyboard artists, and they draw everything after the fact. And
Okay.
I've heard that Pixar and Disney movies, I think in movies, they tend to do the opposite. They tend to start animating and then have the voice actors watch the animation and deliver their lines.
Okay. So from start to finish, how long would you say it takes to produce an episode of an animated series like this?
It depends on how elaborate you want your process to be. Family Guy, I think, is now maybe 12 months, maybe 13. I think we fluctuated between 11 and 13 months for the last 10 years. Bordertown was a little lower budget, so we didn't have certain stages of the process. So I think we were around 9 or 10 months.
And that's per episode or for the season?
That's per episode.
Wow.
You start, if you were starting this month, you'd start on April 1st, launch an episode, give it to a director, and then they start their 12-month process. And then a week later, you start episode number 2 and, get that one into the pipeline so that eventually, a few months later, you have 22 episodes all going through the pipeline at the same time.
Yeah. I mean,
it's confusing.
I bring it up basically because I just remember something from Family Guy last season where they killed off Brian. And, and the whole uproar about it. And then when they brought Brian back a couple episodes later, I just remember friends of mine saying, oh, they brought him back because everybody was so disappointed. And I'm like, no, they didn't.
Right.
This had to have been in the works for a while.
Yeah. I remember that people thought we chickened out. Family Guy chickened out and went back. But no, we were committed. That's the one thing with animation is you have to commit 10 months in advance.
Yeah.
To what you're doing. And it's hard to make any drastic changes.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I figured. I just wanted to defend my point when I was defending you guys about that.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
But Mark, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, we want to send people to to follow Bordertown on Twitter. Bordertown on it's at Bordertown on Fox. I know your Twitter account as well is Mark Is it Henty? Hente?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
I don't tweet much, but I try.
But at Mark Henty on Twitter, and of course, watch Bordertown Sundays at 7:00, 6 p.m. Central, Sunday night.
It's on Fox.com, and we're trying to get a second season. So we're up in the air at the moment. Any tweets you want to give on the show's behalf would be appreciated.
Yeah, we'll definitely encourage everybody to do so, and of course, wish you the best of luck, and we'll keep our fingers crossed for that second season.
All right, thank you so much.
So, all right, guys, stick around, and we'll be back with even more of the showcast right after this.